Hi, and welcome to the Revenge Network, where we explore all kinds of different topics of revenge.
Hi, I'm Liam, and that is Chloe.
Welcome to Maple Creek. On the surface, it's the picture-perfect American dream, a quiet, orderly community where the grass is always green and the property values are always rising. But beneath the flawless facade of beige siding and uniform landscaping, a different story was unfolding. This is the story of a neighborhood that looked perfect on the outside, but was rotting from the inside. It's the story of Carol, an HOA president who ruled with an iron fist, a clipboard, and a secret. And it's the story of how a group of fed-up neighbors, pushed to the brink by petty tyranny, decided to tear her kingdom down.
All right, so let me get this straight. We're diving headfirst into the belly of the beast, a homeowners association horror story.
Oh, it's more than that, Liam. This isn't just about someone getting fined for their trash cans. This is about power, corruption, and what happens when a neighborhood monarch goes too far.
Part 1. The Kingdom of Beige and the Iron Fist. Welcome to Maple Creek. Please hide your joy. Our story begins with David, a recently retired architect who had just inherited his grandmother's house. It was the home he grew up in, an older lot that predated the Maple Creek HOA. Legally, his property wasn't even part of the association, a fact that would soon become critically important. He was looking forward to a quiet retirement, tending his garden and enjoying the peace. But peace was in short supply in Maple Creek, and that's because of her. Carol, the president of the Maple Creek HOA. To say Carol ran a tight ship would be an understatement. She didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. She was the embodiment of what experts call the tyrant board member, an authoritarian leader who rules through intimidation and disregards community input. Her first interaction with David was a masterclass in passive aggression. It was all fake compliments and thinly veiled warnings, a performance that immediately set off alarm bells. She admired his prize-winning roses before casually mentioning his mailbox was a charming but unfortunately non-standard design.
And there it is, the final boss of all Karens. She's got the clipboard, the visor, and the soul of a DMV employee on a Monday morning.
It's a classic power trip. The research identifies this personality type perfectly as the tyrant board member. They thrive on absolute control. Giving someone like that power over a small community is like making them the shark in a very, very small pond.
The Edict of 1,000 Nuisances soon, David, the non-member, began receiving official-looking notices. These weren't just suggestions, they were demands. His vibrant heirloom roses were an unapproved varietal. His trash cans tucked neatly by his garage were visible from a member's property line. Of course, these notices had no legal weight, as an HOA has no authority over a non-member's property. It was pure, targeted harassment. But David wasn't the only target. Carol's reign of terror extended across the entire neighborhood. Her enforcement was both obsessive and selectively applied to anyone she personally disliked. The infractions became legendary for their absurdity. She fined one family $100 because their lawn wasn't green enough in November, citing a creative interpretation of the bylaws. Another resident was fined $50 for planting non-neutral colored flowers. She would issue $25 fines if trash cans were left out for even an hour past pickup time. In one of her most baffling moves, she fined a family because the weeds she demanded they kill were now an unsightly yellow color. She also tried to ban another family's garden gnomes. It was tyranny by 1,000 paper cuts.
This is a textbook case of two things that can get an HOA sued: selective enforcement and harassment. You can't just invent violations based on personal whims, and you absolutely cannot enforce your rules on someone who isn't legally part of your association. David isn't a member. Her actions against him are legally meaningless.
She fined someone for yellowing weeds. My entire lawn is a monument to yellowing weeds. She'd have to put a lien on my soul.
The war of the white picket fence, the tipping point, the single act of petty cruelty that galvanized the neighborhood, wasn't about David. It was about a puppy. A young mother named Maria, a new resident, wanted to build a small, 3-foot-high white picket fence so her new puppy could play safely in the yard. She submitted a perfectly compliant application. But Carol had taken a personal dislike to Maria. Without consulting the rest of the board, she denied the request, citing a vague, aesthetic integrity clause in the bylaws. When Maria politely asked for clarification, Carol went into what residents later called panic mode, threatening her with daily fines and a cease and desist letter if she dared to build it.
And this is where Carol shows all the classic warning signs of a dictator president. She's making unilateral decisions, refusing to allow any dissent, and pursuing a personal agenda against a resident. She's not governing, she's ruling.
This seemingly small conflict over a fence was about to expose something much larger. It's often the case that such an obsessive focus on minor infractions isn't just a personality flaw. By making life miserable over grass, gnomes, and fences, a tyrannical leader can create an atmosphere of fear and exhaustion. This discourages residents from asking bigger, more dangerous questions. Questions like, where is all our money actually going? The war over the fence wasn't Carol's real goal. It was a tool of suppression. Part 2. The resistance gathers. The whispers in the cul-de-sac. The fence incident was the final straw. Maria and David started talking. Soon, a small clandestine meeting was held in David's backyard, safely outside the reach of Carol's jurisdiction. One by one, neighbors who had been too intimidated to speak up before began sharing their own stories. They discovered a pattern of abuse. A decorated veteran had been repeatedly harassed for flying the American flag from a pole in his yard instead of a stanchion on his house. A family was threatened with legal action because their children's swing set was stained a non-approved shade of muted purple. They realized they weren't alone. Carol hadn't just bullied one of them, she had bullied all of them.
This is my favorite part of the movie. It's the gathering the team montage. You've got David the architect, Maria the mom, the veteran with the flag. All they need is a safecracker and a tech whiz, and they can pull off a heist.
And this is the tyrant's biggest tactical error. Harassing one person is easy, but when you harass everyone, you don't just create fear, you create an army.
Follow the money. With his architect's eye for contracts and numbers, David grew suspicious. The fees listed in the HOA budget for landscape management were astronomical, yet the common areas were maintained with shoddy, minimal effort. The residents decided to exercise their legal right to inspect the HOA's financial records. Carol stonewalled them. She claimed the documents were confidential and that their request was disruptive. This refusal was the single biggest red flag. It's the moment the investigation shifted from overcoming a bully to exposing a potential criminal.
This is the point of no return. An honest board, even a strict one, has no reason to hide its financials. It's their fundamental fiduciary duty to be transparent with the members whose money they are managing. In almost every major case of HOA fraud and embezzlement, the story starts right here. The board refuses to open the books. Her refusal isn't just her being difficult, it's an active cover-up. It's a confession to anyone who knows what to look for.
It's like in a cop show when the suspect says, "I've got nothing to hide," and then immediately asks for a lawyer and swallows a SIM card.
The Trojan horse strategy. Realizing they would never get the information from the outside, the residents adopted a new strategy, one inspired by countless tales of grassroots rebellion. They would take over from the inside. Maria decided to run for a seat on the 5-person board. She was quickly joined by 2 other respected homeowners, Gerald, a meticulous accountant, and Susan, a sharp-witted retired lawyer. Their platform was simple: transparency, fairness, and fiscal responsibility. Carol and her 2 cronies on the board laughed it off. In her mind, her power was absolute. She couldn't imagine losing.
This is brilliant. It's the ultimate power move in HOA warfare. If the castle walls are too high, you don't lay siege. You get yourself invited to the party, and then you change the locks from the inside.
I love that their team is an accountant and a lawyer. Carol brought a clipboard to a gunfight, and they just showed up with the entire justice system.
Part 3. Judgment Day. The annual meeting meltdown. The annual HOA meeting was standing room only. The air was thick with anticipation. Carol gave a condescending speech about the importance of rules and order. Then it was the challengers' turn. Maria, Gerald, and Susan laid out their case. They didn't have the financials yet, but they had everything else. They presented a slideshow of Carol's reign of terror. They had testimonials from harassed residents. They had David's meticulously documented case of harassment against a non-member. For the first time, the entire scope of Carol's abuse was laid bare for everyone to see. The mood in the room shifted from quiet resentment to open anger. The vote was a landslide. The resistance had won. What followed was a complete meltdown of the social order. Carol began shouting, calling the residents ungrateful and destructive before storming out of the room, leaving her clipboard behind. The audit of no return. The new board, President Maria, Treasurer Gerald, and Secretary Susan, held their first meeting the very next day. Their first and only agenda item: seize all financial records and hire an independent forensic accountant. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. A company called Maple Creek Elite Landscaping had been paid over $350,000 from the HOA's reserve funds in just 2 years. But it was a ghost, a shell corporation with a P.O. box for an address, and its registered owner, Carol's husband. The scheme was a classic in the world of white-collar crime. Funds were funneled from the HOA to the fake company for services never rendered, then laundered into Carol's personal accounts. The residents' money had paid for Carol's luxury SUV, her family vacations, and extensive renovations on her own home.
This is a textbook example of how this kind of fraud works. The structure of many HOAs creates a perfect, low-oversight environment for it. You have volunteer boards who may lack financial expertise, a general lack of state-level regulation, and a legal protection called the business judgment rule that shields board members from liability for bad decisions as long as it's not outright fraud. This combination creates a system that is structurally vulnerable to exactly this kind of crime. Carol's story isn't an anomaly. It's a predictable outcome of a system with major loopholes.
The comeuppance, guided by their lawyer, Susan, the new board turned the entire audit file over to the local district attorney's office. The end came swiftly. Carol was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including grand theft, fraud, and money laundering. Her kingdom of beige had crumbled.
And there it is, the ultimate comeuppance. It started with a fine for a flower and ended with a felony conviction. It just goes to show you, when you're dealing with an HOA, always read the bylaws, always attend the meetings, and if something feels wrong, always follow the money.
So the moral of the story is, if you're going to embezzle $250,000, maybe don't piss off the entire neighborhood by being a jerk about their mailboxes. It's just bad business. Now their property values are probably going to go up just because the Wicked Witch is gone. That's the real win.
It was a long and bitter fight, but the residents of Maple Creek learned a valuable lesson. The only thing required for the triumph of petty evil is for good neighbors to do nothing. And they decided to do something.